Monarchy or republic? Should Australia keep the British King as head of state? Well, welcome to Mark and Pete, two blokes with half an opinion. Here's a thought.
When the wearer of a sovereign crown appears old hat in the land of thunder, the head beneath then starts to frown as the rest looks worse down under. Yes, indeed. How poignant. Well, Australia weighs up its future. Should it have the king as the head of state? Now, as we've seen over the years, they voted as it's going to be a republic, or maybe it's good to keep the allegiance with Britain's old empire. Now, it's still part of the Commonwealth, but many people think, well, Charles and, of course, Camilla, who recently visited Australia, had many drinks, three-course meals, and many other great memorabilia to do with royalty. And I'm sure that that was a great flag-waving exercise. But some Australians say, no, I think it's time to change. Well, Mr. Pete, what do you think? Should we be getting groovy down under, or maybe it's time to say goodbye?
Well, Mr. Mark, what we have here is a case of a very forceful argument, I think. Forceful reasons, very powerful reasons for King Charles remaining head of state in Australia. But the force of them is due to, and the power behind them is due really to sentimentality. A lot people
Yes.
just love the idea of there being a king, and we love it in this country as well, having a king, having a proper king instead of some president or other swanning around as head of state. You have something with a bit of history behind it, and so that is, I believe, what is behind the desire to keep it as it is. It's this strong the strong feeling that to ditch it is to cut your ties with history, and thus you lose a bit of who you are. And I say, although I think it is sentimental, it is very powerful because of that. You have to recognise that sentimentality is a big part of the Western tradition.
Well, it is, and let's really sort of get to the depths of this. For I'm sure our international listeners are probably very aware that, Australia is very much under this colonial period. It's 1788 to 1901. That's when the British settlement of Australia began as a penal colony, and that was governed by a captain of the Royal Navy. Now, the point being here is that over the many years, Britain has had a lot of control. There's been a very strong relationship with Australia. The other thing to note is that, and this is where it becomes significant, Australia has also fought for Britain as part of its empire through two world wars. And that is significant in itself. So what we've seen is really a collaboration, a relationship. And whilst, again, I think that, the royal family has been this head of state, and then let's be honest, folks, it's clear and visible on the Australian flag. It's there.
Yeah,
There
true.
we have the Union Jack stuck in the corner. Now, but for how long? Now, here's my take on this. I understand that events have changed. All the bit that I've given you is history, and much more to come. I know we talk about the fact that many criminals were actually sent to Australia during the late 1700s, early 1800s. So, for example, if you were a sheep stealer in Britain, you
Yeah.
were tried, and at the time you could have been hung. It could have been your fate. But no, they changed their ways and actually sent people to life imprisonment in Australia. Of course, communities then developed, and they were allowed to actually, ironically, have farms for things like sheep farming and many others. But Australia is doing very well. I mean, look at it as a country. Over the last 200 years, it's blossomed. It's become a modern state. So I would say that because of the fact that Australia now has the ability to self-govern, self-rule, it's got rich with minerals, metals, and mining. It really does it actually need a head of state in the 21st century. Now, what I do think is important is I would probably err on the side that they maybe don't need Charles or anyone else for that matter to be head of state. But what I do think is important is we need to have some allegiance. The Commonwealth, I think, is the key. Now, it's not just Australia. It's not just Britain. There are many other Commonwealth countries. Now, I know that that sort of stems from some of the history. But what I do think is important is having that community of leaders. And I think it's important in a world that sort of sees a lot of turbulence elsewhere. So that club, as some people may say, may be historic, but I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But when it comes to having a head of state, a crown, I'm not entirely sure that certainly this new generation of Australians really wants to see Charles as the head of state. There's no disrespect to him personally, but I think that maybe they want to sort of govern their own, have their own flag, and move forward. But that's maybe something that we'll see in the next referendum to come.
Yes, but yes, that's the thing is, yes, you had this. We had a referendum. Well, they had a referendum in Australia, and the voice to Parliament vote, as it was known, they had, and yeah, they may well have another one in the future. But certainly at the moment, it looks like public sentiment is not really going for a change. But the question you have to ask is, if you're going to remain as having the king as our king as head of state, what does that mean when it comes to your loyalties and negotiations with other countries? So I'm asking the question, you see, what would it mean? For example, China is the dominant country of that part of the world. Yep. Australia has got now getting stronger and stronger relationships with it. What would it mean? Well, actually, is it negative or positive? I'm asking the question because I don't actually know, and maybe they don't either. That's what it might be a mistake. Then, if you really don't know what the result will be, how would it change? Do the links for Britain, with Britain being that strong that you have a British head of state, do they increase your standing in the world or decrease it? That's the question. That's part of the question that you need to ask.
Well, there's also another one as well, because we've been talking about what the Australians think, but it'd be interesting to know what the British people think.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of people will be more than aware of the development of Australia, and it's certainly improved in its manufacturing, in its arts and culture, and many other things. So it's become much more distinctive. Certainly in the 21st century, it's gained a lot more recognition. And yes, you're right, they've got a lot of competition in their region, but I think that for British people, I don't think that having Charles as the head of state over Australia is as important as many other things that we've seen in recent times. And again, I know that this talks about the influence of royalty, having a monarch. Is that something that we should still have ourselves? That's another bigger debate. Because ultimately, I think that we need to put more focus on Britain. And Britain is not in the best of states at the moment. And maybe what we should do is focus on the Commonwealth. To me, that's the solution. I think it's building out the Commonwealth, making that work, continuing the trade relations that we need to have with places like Australia, and making a longer-term commitment in those sort of ways. The fact that, that somebody might have to sort of swear allegiance to a state somewhere else in the world, perhaps it doesn't really weigh too well with the recent generations. And I could see subsequent generations of Australians thinking the same as well. I think it's almost inevitable that at some point the next referendum will play in favour of a republic. And I think that's the way that they will go. Yeah. But we should basically open it up to all of our listeners, wherever you are in the world. What do you think?
Yes, what do you think? And remember, there's a distinction here. We could have Australia not having the British monarch as head of state, but remaining part of the Commonwealth and being part and developing that maybe as a great trading bloc, which we at Mark and Pete think would be a great idea. That, along with just moving it wider, the Anglosphere generally, those countries who have those historic links with England, not just the language, but culture, legal framework, etc. But yes, let us know. Just go to markandpete.com. You can leave a comment on this and any episode. It would be great to hear from you. But for Mark and myself, it's goodbye for now, and catch you next time.